All right then, we'll be starting with our next talk then. If you like it, Tobias Madl here to tell us a bit more about phishing for loss of funds. Thank you.
So, welcome everybody. Quick question in the beginning. Have you ever heard of Riverguard? If yes, raise your hand please. If not, I'm very happy to introduce you to it. Today we'll talk about security. Every hack that is happening with blockchain, especially today's talk, the Solana blockchain, is a bug not caught in time. So we want to catch all bugs. We are an IT security company that audits code, that audits blockchains, and also other stuff where we get our hands on. But we are a limited amount of people, so we can do audits. We can look at the code of smart contracts and try to review as many open source projects as possible, but we will still miss some, and in this case also miss some bugs. However, we had observation, because we had a lot of war rooms after exploits or hacks happened, and we saw that a lot of these bugs that were used were pretty simple. Like, bug was not super simple to spot at all. However, the user only had to interact with the protocol with 1 or 2 transactions, and then he was able to exfiltrate money somehow. So this is the bugs that we try to focus on, but we wanted to do it in a big scale and do what the hackers do, but better and faster. And in the end, the goal was to protect all contracts deployed on Solana from these kind of bugs. But how to do this? We had some first ideas to go with a symbolic execution environment, where we put the contracts in a digital Solana BDM and try to mutate it or do things with it, or we tried to fuzz these contracts. And this was a nice idea to finding the complex stuff, but it was not suitable for finding the easy bugs, because the easy bugs have a lot of these combinations of, so for example, deposit and withdraw functions, and these are dependencies fuzzing and symbolic executions do not get. So you had to either instrument and do some manual adjustments or set up a special pair of functionalities, and all of this was super complex and did not work out the way we wanted to, and it was also not required for lots of these bugs. So when we looked at these hacks that happened on, for example, Solana, there was often just a user interacting with a protocol, like depositing some tokens, doing something with the utility token, and then withdrawing it again, for example. However, when the user then sees some weird behavior that he thinks, okay, how did this happen now? And digs deeper, and then it turns out that he manages to get more money out that he initially put into the wall, for example. He turns attacker and starts to exploit the contract. So he interacts with the mainnet, he puts on transactions that behave weirdly, and then exploits it later on. So now we went into this position and thought like an attacker. How can we behave like the attacker does in the recent hacks? So it's black box testing. We don't have any source code, we don't have access to anything, we just have access to the contract deployed and the user interface, for example, the hacker also would use. So the first step would be to interact with the programs via front end, and then look at what the transaction did on chain and understand what could possibly be exchanged, be done, be mutated in this transaction, we got it, and see if it still succeeds. So get this weird behavior that the attacker also observes. Step 2 and 3 are easily automatable. There's a lot of things that you can do, like RPC, where you can look at transactions and you can mutate them. Already we created, for example, the POC framework where you can build your own transactions and then push it on the chain. So steps 2 and 3 were no problem at all. But step 1 would require us to interact with the front end. And this is, again, not easily automatable. But we found a solution for this too. Let me introduce you to the river. The river is the flow of transactions happening on Solana every second. There's millions of transactions a day, and all of these transactions just interact with these protocols. So we don't have to interact with them because all other users already do. And that's the benefit on the one side, but the downside on the other side, because now we don't have to interact. Instead of one that is already done for us, we can just pull the transactions from the mainnet, but it's gigabits of data per second. Like, it's huge amounts of data. And for especially Solana, they run on the hardware limits that's even possible. And we want to take these transactions, mutate them multiple ways, and see if they still succeed. So we increase the amount of things we have to do with every transaction happening on mainnet. So it seems kind of infeasible. However, we got it down. And that's Riverguard. So what's Riverguard? Riverguard is the first line of defense for all Solana contracts currently deployed on mainnet. They automatically find and exploit bugs even in closed source on-chain contracts. Exploit is privately, not on mainnet, so nobody would ever see it. But this is for verification and eliminating false positives. So no money is stolen at all, just for verification. And it's completely free for everybody, so every developer can just register on the Riverguard page, and when they verify that they know the contract, you get free access to all the vulnerabilities this program finds for you. The Solana Foundation got a grant for this, so it's fine for them. And it works. We have already confirmed a lot of different bugs and a lot of loss of funds. I think the last few weeks we found 12 of these loss of funds in the contracts. And let's look into it, how it works, and one example can be just picked up recently. So how does Riverguard work? Well, as previously said, we have the river of successful transactions on mainnet. And now we pull these transactions and mutate them, and then it generates the findings in our software. How we do this? We have a patched validator that pulls or gets also all transactions from the mainnet, but these transactions don't contain all the data. So in Solana, it's this case that you have the transaction, you have the EX data that you get passed down, and you have the accounts that are put into each transaction, but you don't have the data of the accounts. They are stored locally in the ledger, and the transaction just tells the differences, what's happening on these accounts. So we have to also pull this data from chain, and we store this in a Redis cache, with, as previously said, gigabits of data per second. And then we create these standalone transactions. So we put together each transaction with the EX data, with the accounts passed down to it, and the account data. And these standalone transactions are then put in a Kafka queue and pulled by our workers that do different mutations to it. And this is done on multiple servers to keep up with the speed of the Solana Mainnet. And how does this transaction mutation work? Well, we take each transaction and then we mutate some input, like change the signers, change some accounts that are put into it, change the instruction data, and so on and so on. And with all these different mutations, if this transaction still succeeds, we know there is something wrong. We don't know yet if it's a bug for 100%, but we know that we have to look deeper into it and maybe contact the developers to find out if it is a bug or if it is not a bug. And even without source, it is most of the time already possible to identify if it is exploitable or not. So how does one of these mutations work? A common mistake developers do is allowing self-transfers. So for example, we take, on the left is our wallet, and on the right is the vault, like the vault of some program where you lock up your money, and then you get a liquidity token to work with, like play around to bet or something. So you transfer your USDC to the vault, and then you get this liquidity token. However, when you don't check that the destination of this transfer is your vault, you have a possible self-transfer. So you can create a transaction where I transfer money but to my own wallet again. And if the smart contract does not check this case, he still passes on the liquidity token to me. So I got liquidity tokens without actually depositing my money. And this is a very common bug. We've seen a lot of problems. This is also one of the main bugs that was exploited by in the wild by attackers abusing these in smart contracts deployed. So let's look into one example. We have Socials 11. There was a casino's smart contract on Solana, and our software Riverguard showed, yeah, there is a self-transfer. And they could replace the public key that deposited the tokens with the destination. So it was possible to transfer the tokens to ourselves, and the transaction still succeeded, and they said here, down on the right, the tokens got deposited. So what does the casino do with it? Well, the casino expected us to deposit our SPL tokens to a centralized wallet. Then we could get the liquidity tokens, we could gamble with it, and if some money is left in the end, we can withdraw it again with a withdraw request, and then the tokens would get transferred back to our wallet via regular SPL transfer. When we now look at this deposit instruction, we have here different parameters. The first one is the USDC mint, so that we want to transfer USDC into the vault. The second one is the amount that we want to transfer. As we see here, it's the 32 USDC, and here is it right up with some decimals. So we know, okay, the second parameter of the deposit instruction was the amount. And the third was not an account. So we have to look into the instruction data that was also passed into the transaction. And when we decode it from hex, we see that the number here printed in the transfer is also inside the instruction data, so it's probably the identifier of our account on the casino side. So they have like an account identifier for us, so when we deposit, they know who to deposit the liquidity tokens to. And in the end, the last parameter is the vault of the casino. So this is the deposit owner where we should send our money to. So far, so good. As previously said, we had the self-transfer. So our educated guess here is that the backend parses this lock and calls transaction invoking the deposit program, and this deposit program checks the deposit owner. This would be the normal flow, and then it triggers the liquidity token transfer. What could be exploitable now? Well, first of all, only if the backend credits deposit despite the self-transfer, this would be exploitable. So even when we transfer to ourselves and the backend does not check that we do a self-transfer, then this would be exploitable. However, this is in the backend, so we cannot verify it off-chain. So normally we stop here and try to contact the developers and say, hey, we see that there's a self-transfer. Can you check it if this is checked in your backend? However, we tried to contact them. We went onto the Discord and said, hey, we have a security issue, can you please talk to us? And they just banned us. Then we created another account and got a Discord and said, guys, we are from Niederland. we think we have a security problem found in your contract, and they banned us again. So in the end, finally got a contract via email. The third tries the charm, and then they said, prove it first, otherwise it's a normal transaction. And this is not, in our opinion, the most professional response, because when we try it on mainnet, everybody could see it and exploit it too. But all right, you'll do it live. How could it be broken in the end? Well, the backend does not actually check the deposit owner, or we can just log inject. Like parsing strings is hard. Both of these bugs could be probably used to trick the backend into transferring us the liquidity token. So what we do now is that we create a transaction where we manipulate the EX data, because this data can just be passed in there. And instead of just entering the amount and our account ID, we add the vault owner in the ending. We just put another space in there and pass on the vault owner. And then we'll see if this transaction succeeds. What we did now is just put the same account twice. Like after here, we added the 7RN public key. It's the vault of the casino, and in the end, this is the account where we transfer to the in the transfer. So we sent the money, but we also added an additional account in there, and the transaction succeeded. So this is a possible block injection bug. Then we saw that the money still got deposited and tried it again, but this time we made a self-transfer. So we inserted again the 7RN, the vault owner account of the casino, but in it we did a self-transfer to ourselves. And it turns out that we still got the liquidity token. So the parser just looks for this account if it's in there, but does not check that the transfer is really happening to it. So in the end, we now could generate unlimited amounts of these liquidity tokens and withdraw it and completely empty their casino vault and run away with the money. But we're the good guys. We did this once and we instantly told them, like, look, we just successfully got money out of it without sending you any. And they quickly pitched it then. But in the end, it was a transaction that was live on chain. So if somebody would have looked there, he would possibly have seen this exploit live and could have repeated it with a bigger amount of money. So what can we learn from that? The findings that Riverguard reports is just a starting point. We have often to look into it still to eliminate false positives, but we have a lot of false positive elimination already in place. So if we contact you, the developer, often it is pretty surely a bug, and sometimes we can not verify it because it's in the backend. The cooperation makes it a lot easier for us, so we don't have to do something on mainnet. And in the end, it's a call for action for everybody here. If you are one of the developers or owner of a contract, just register at riverguard.io and see if your contract has any findings in our software. And then if it has, you can just contact us and we help you identify if it's a bug or not. And we will also try to contact you if we think there's a very critical bug in your contract at the moment. So by registering, you're making the ecosystem more secure. Thank you, everybody, and thanks to Solana Foundation. And I'm very happy to answer any questions if there are some.
Any questions?
Do you also plan to develop a set of test cases which I could download in the test director and let it run on my code to verify any bugs for the service?
Well, yeah, the point is that the software does not use any code. We need transactions to perform these mutations. So you maybe could deploy it on DevNet or testnet, interact with your program, and then run the software on it. However, the software is currently not open source yet because we have around 400 to 500 bucks on mainnet. So if you would open source it, the amount of hacks would increase drastically. So we could not open source it yet. But when all these bugs are fixed, and we hope so, it's done in like the next half year or something, then we will probably source it so everybody could run a testnet or DevNet and just test against their own programs.
Any other questions? All right then. I think that's it. But
I'm staying around if some more questions arise.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much for your time, and as a memento for your for helping us out, speaking over here, please here accept this mug.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you so much for your time.